The truck slowed as it rolled into the small village. Snow lined the narrow road, untouched except for a few wagon tracks. Wooden houses stood close together, smoke rising calmly from their chimneys. It looked nothing like the ruined cities the women had marched through weeks before. The German women, POWs, sat silently in the back, wrapped in thin coats. No one spoke. No one dared to hope. One of them finally whispered, her voice shaking, Are we still in Europe?" No one answered. The guards ordered them down. Boots hit the frozen ground. The women braced themselves, shouting, insults, maybe worse. That was what they expected by now. Instead, they heard a voice, a calm one. "Bitte langsam. Es ist rutschig." The women froze. That was German. Perfect German. They turned toward the speaker. A middle-aged man stood near a barn holding a lantern. His accent was clean, familiar, almost comforting. Another voice joined in. "Ihr könnt eure Taschen dort abstellen." One woman's eyes widened. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. "He's speaking our language." More villagers appeared. Men, women, even children. None were wearing uniforms, no weapons, just winter clothes and curious expressions. A young girl stepped forward, holding a scarf. "Kalt Hütte," she said softly. "You must be freezing." The women stared, unable to move. One finally spoke, her voice barely audible. Why do you speak German?" The man smiled gently. "My parents came from Bavaria," he replied. "Long time ago. This is Canada now." Canada. The word didn't feel real. The women had prepared for cruelty, for revenge, for humiliation. They were not prepared for this. As they were guided toward the village hall, one woman clutched her coat tighter and whispered the question none of them could stop thinking. "If they speak to us like this, what are they going to do next?" They stepped inside, hearts pounding. Not with fear this time, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. The village hall was warm. That alone felt unreal. The women stood near the doorway, unsure if they were allowed to step farther inside. Long wooden tables filled the room. Lanterns hung from the ceiling. The smell of soup drifted through the air. One of the women whispered, "They're feeding us inside?" A Canadian woman approached, carrying bowls. She spoke gently, in German. "Everyone eats together here." The women sat slowly, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the floor. Their hands shook as bowls were placed in front of them. Then, something unexpected happened. The Canadian villagers sat down with them, not apart, not above, together. A man stood and spoke calmly. "In this village," he said, "no one eats while another watches." Silence filled the hall. One of the German women stared at her bowl, then at the people around her. Her breath caught. Tears ran down her face before she could stop them. "No one has ever said that to us before," she whispered. No one laughed. No one rushed her. They simply waited until everyone was ready to eat. That night, the women were not taken to a camp. They were taken to homes. Small houses, wooden floors, quiet rooms warmed by stoves. Each woman was shown a bed, a real bed, with blankets. One of them stood frozen beside it. "Is this for me?" she asked. The woman of the house nodded. "Yes, you need rest." Before leaving, the Canadian woman paused at the door. She turned back and spoke softly, in German. "No one will come in while you sleep." The words landed heavier than any order ever had. The door closed. No lock snapped. No boots approached. No shouting followed. For the first time in years, one of the women lay down without fear. She whispered into the dark, "This is captivity." Why does it feel like being human again? Outside, the village went quiet. Inside, the lights slowly went out, not in fear, but in peace. Morning came quietly. No whistles, no shouting, no guards at the door. Sunlight slipped through the curtains. One of the women sat up suddenly, confused by the silence. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then she saw the room, the bed, the blanket still wrapped around her. Downstairs, the smell of bread drifted through the house. When the women gathered outside, the village was already awake. Children passed by on their way to school. Farmers worked the fields. Life continued, calm and ordinary. A Canadian officer stood near the hall. He did not raise his voice. "You will remain here for now," he said, "but today you choose." The women exchanged nervous glances. "You may stay together in the village," he continued, "or you may be moved to a standard camp." Silence. One woman stepped forward. "If we stay," she asked carefully, "will we still be treated like prisoners?" The officer shook his head. "You will be treated like people." No one had to discuss it. Every woman stayed. Weeks passed. The women were no longer marched. They worked instead, helping in kitchens, barns, and workshops, always supervised but never shouted at. One evening, a woman sat at a small table with a pencil in her hand. She began to write. "Dear Mother, I am alive, and something impossible is happening." She stopped. Her hand trembled. She knew the rules. Letters were inspected. Some were never sent. Around her, other women were writing too. Some stared at blank pages. Others folded their letters slowly, unsure if words like kindness were even allowed to exist on paper. A Canadian woman approached and spoke softly. "You may write," she said, "but do not promise anything you cannot keep." The writer nodded. She folded the letter and placed it in the envelope, not knowing if it would ever leave the village. But for the first time she realized something else. Even if the letter was never sent, the truth had already been written. One morning, something was different. The women noticed it immediately. The small wooden gate at the edge of the village, the one they passed every day, was open. No guard stood beside it, no sign, no warning. They stopped walking. One woman whispered, "Is this a mistake?" Another shook her head. "It feels intentional." They waited. Minutes passed. No one came running. No orders were shouted. A Canadian farmer walked past them, carrying tools. He glanced at the open gate, then at the women. "You're expected back by supper," he said calmly. That was all. The women stood there, staring at the open road beyond the village. Freedom was right there. And yet, none of them moved. Not one. They turned back together. Because for the first time, staying was a choice. Time changed shape in the village. At first, the women counted days, then weeks. Then, they stopped counting altogether. Work became routine, not forced, expected. Each morning they were given tasks, and each evening they returned to the same houses, the same tables, the same quiet. One woman learned how to bake bread the Canadian way. Another helped mend coats. A third was asked to watch children while their parents worked. She hesitated. "What if I do something wrong?" she asked. The woman of the house smiled. "Then we fix it together." That sentence stayed with her. One afternoon, the women gathered near the river after work. The guards were still there, always at a distance, but no one paid them much attention anymore. One of the younger women spoke suddenly. "I don't remember the last time I was afraid to sleep." No one answered right away. Then another said quietly, "I don't remember the last time someone trusted me." They stood there, listening to the water, realizing something unsettling. They were no longer surviving. They were living. And that frightened them more than captivity ever had, because they all knew this could not last forever. It arrived on an ordinary morning. No sirens, no trucks, just an envelope. The Canadian officer stood in the village hall, holding a single sheet of paper. The red stamp at the bottom was impossible to miss. The women noticed it immediately. Orders always came with stamps. He cleared his throat. "This is not immediate," he said carefully, "but it is official." The hall went quiet. The paper announced a transfer, eventually. The women would be moved to a larger facility, closer to the coast. Processing. Reassignment. Words that meant one thing. This place was temporary. One woman felt her hands go numb. Another whispered, "So, this ends." The officer folded the paper slowly. "You will be informed in advance," he said. "Nothing changes today." But everything had already changed. That afternoon, work continued. Bread was baked, floors were swept, children laughed in the street, and yet every sound felt sharper. That evening, one of the women asked a question no one wanted to voice. Did we imagine it? Or did this really happen? No one answered. Because if this had been real, then losing it would hurt more than losing freedom ever did. The village woke up like any other morning. Smoke rose from chimneys. Footsteps echoed on frozen ground. Someone laughed near the well, but the women felt it immediately. This was not a normal day. They went to their tasks as usual. One helped knead dough, another repaired a fence. A third swept the hall floor slowly, carefully, as if it mattered more today. A Canadian man watched one of them work. "You don't have to rush," he said. She nodded, but kept going. If she stopped, she knew she would break. At noon, the women gathered for a meal. The same long table, the same bowls, the same rule. No one eats alone. Someone told a joke. It landed wrong. Laughter came too quickly, then faded. That afternoon, children followed the women through the village, not to stare, but to walk beside them. One little boy handed a woman a carved wooden bird. "So, you remember us?" he said. She crouched down and hugged him before she could stop herself. No one corrected her. As evening fell, the women stood outside the houses that had sheltered them. One traced the doorframe with her fingers, memorizing the shape. Tomorrow, this would be gone. Tonight, it was still theirs. The trucks arrived before sunrise. Engines idled quietly, as if even the machines understood this was not a moment for noise. The women stood in a line they had formed themselves. No shouting ordered it. No one rushed them. Coats were buttoned. Bags were light, lighter than when they had arrived. Villagers gathered at a distance. No speeches, no flags. Just people standing still in the cold. One of the women looked toward the houses behind them. The windows were dark now, the beds empty, the tables clean. A Canadian woman stepped forward and pressed something into her hand, a folded piece of paper. "It's the recipe," she said softly, "so you don't forget." The woman nodded, unable to speak. Another villager approached and handed a scarf to someone else. A man placed a carved wooden bird into a pocket. Small things, quiet things. The officer gave a single nod. "It's time." As the women climbed into the trucks, one of them turned back. "Why?" she asked suddenly. "Why were you like this to us?" The man who had first spoken German in the village answered, "Because the war was already taking enough." The trucks began to move. No one waved wildly, no one cried out. But as the village disappeared behind the trees, one woman opened her bag and touched the paper inside. Another held the wooden bird tightly. A third whispered the words she had learned here, the ones that still felt unreal. "You will be treated like people." Years later, many of them would forget names, faces, exact dates, but none of them would ever forget this place. Because long after the war ended, this village proved something they carried for the rest of their lives. Humanity does not belong to one side, and kindness can survive, even a war.